The following program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.
Every day, citizens around the country are faced with new dilemmas. Dilemmas that affect them profoundly. Whether it's injustice, discrimination, falling through the cracks, scandals and cronyism, balances of power, ethics, religious freedoms, state versus citizens, and unfunded mandates, and the list goes on and on and on. Welcome to Speak Up. It's directed at those who have fallen through the cracks, and it gives them a voice. It's your turn to speak up, to stand up and fight back.
Welcome to this edition of Speak Up. I'm Kevin Avard, your host, and today's show is sponsored by the Center for Redress of Grievances, LLC. You can reach them at redressofgrievance.com. Today I have a special guest, Speaker OBrien, or former Speaker OBrien from the New Hampshire House of Representatives, and welcome to the show.
Welcome. Thank you for having me, Kevin.
Right.
It's always a pleasure to come on.
Well, you have a long history here in the House, it seems, and I actually hail you as one of our good leaders and great leaders, and you took some bold stamps. Actually, I remember following you outside of the House when the mobs were there.
That's right. Did you protect me?
I protected you. I had you back, but
I remember there was one day that we were bringing some legislation forward, and Kevin, I just don't know what I was thinking. I just wanted to go over and get a sandwich across the street.
Right.
Walked out, and I was surrounded by people, some of whom were not at all happy. That's for sure.
Yeah, I didn't see the love.
Right.
I didn't see the love, and I don't know if it was the finger or the fist or both, but they were intimidating, and I didn't like the way they were getting their message across. But we prevailed in that hearing.
Those of us who care about the long-term health of our society, our state, that care about fiscal responsibility, care about making sure that we don't do what is immediately comfortable in the sense of putting another program in place or pander to people by spending as much money as we can and always saying yes, are going to be in a position where there are those who are used to politicians always saying yes, used to government growing all the time, who are going to be angry. And we knew that was going to happen.
Right.
It was somewhat shocking and when you have death threats, so we have people like you're talking that instance there, but it just had to be done.
Right. Well, I was standing next to Representative Gaida in the Reps Hall, and we were looking at the balcony, and we were looking at certain individuals giving us the finger and pointing the fist at us and saying, oh, "We're going to get you," and he was just shrugging it off. Of course, he'll take a fight on.
I don't think we speak out of school to say Brandon Guide is a little bit pugnacious.
Yeah. Well, I don't mind standing next to him.
Yeah, it's good he is that way.
Right. Well, and that was encouraging because when you had to stand your ground and stand up for what the principles that you think are going to help and make things right, it's not always popular, and you still have to go forward. And that was a very big learning experience for me. For my first time, just having to go against just a mob.
Yeah, let's remind ourselves, remind your viewers too, of what you and I and other conservatives achieved this last term. What we achieved was a change in the vocabulary of budgeting in
Right.
Concord, because when we came, the watchwords were tax and spend and borrow and new program and do more. And what we came in and said is we have to live within our means,
Right.
and that there should not be any new taxes. And we have to look at opportunities for business tax relief, because we had the worst, and still it's not a good situation, but we had the worst business taxes of any state in the country. And we put in place a budget that reduced spending by almost $1.2 billion, and things worked out fine.
And that seemed to draw a big crowd, didn't it?
It did. And you know what happens now? I'm back in the legislature. I participated in the budget debate this time, and the watchwords were no longer tax, spend, and borrow. Partly because of what we did, partly because we have a Republican Senate. The watchwords remain: live within your means.
Right.
No tax increases, no spending increases. And the result coming from what you did, Kevin, and all of our colleagues did, is that if we had just level funded the last budget when we came in, we'd just done it now for the 2 years that just expired and now the other 2 years, if we'd just done that, the people of New Hampshire would have had to come up with $2 billion more in taxes for that 4-year period. That's a lot of money. For a family of 4 in New Hampshire, that's over $6,100 in additional taxes and fees they would have had to pay. Kevin, I don't know about you, but for most of us, that's real money. That's the money that you heat your house over a couple of winters, if not more.
Right.
That's your utility money. That's money maybe that you feed your family for a year. And important money, and it just shows what the reason for being fiscally responsible.
One of the things that we didn't seem to fix, and we still have a problem, is the pensions and the unfunded mandates.
Right.
And it seems like and Ken was the chair. Ken Hawkins.
Ken Hawkins.
Ken Hawkins
of the
was the
special
chair.
committee I put together for pension reform.
He did a fabulous job, very very professional, and he knew his stuff. But it was like pulling teeth to get some reform. And now, if we don't fix this pension, with this unfunded mandate, are we looking at what happened in Detroit?
Yeah, so there's 2 disappointments that come out of the last term. One is that we weren't able to get right-to-work legislation passed. The other is that we weren't able to address the public employee pension problem. And one of the reasons I set up a special committee to do that, and Representative Hawkins was the chairman of it, is that I had read an article as my speakership just began, as the term just began, that in The Economist magazine, that said New Hampshire was in the top, or however you view it, bottom 10 in the country for unfunded liabilities per capita. Well, depending on what you assume the rate of return, it's somewhere between $4 and $7 billion.
What does that mean? What is an unfunded mandate?
So that means if you play out the actuarial future of the pension plan, it's going to need $7 billion more than it's going to either come in contributions or return on investment together. So there's money that goes in based on people paying into it, the state primarily paying into it, and return on investment stocks and so forth. If you assume what is real optimistic return on investment, about a 7 or 8%, I think they're at now, we would be somewhere between $4 and $7 billion underwater.
Right.
That's a lot of money in New Hampshire terms. $7 billion is basically 3 to 4 years worth of state-funded spending. We could just choose to not have any state police, not have any of the agencies operating up in Concord, no courts operating, and only then, after 3 or 4 years of that, would we get enough money to bring ourselves back up to a level where we have enough money in the pension fund. And so what we were looking to do was to address that in various ways, some as adjustments, and we did a few of those, but also going forward, well, if we have a problem now, why keep on doing the same thing that caused the problem?
Right.
And that's where we ran into a real roadblock.
What are the possibilities of us turning into another Detroit? Right
Yeah,
now,
the possibilities are that a lot of states are. New Hampshire is an affluent state. We're 3rd or 4th, depending on how you look at it, in terms of per capita income in the country. If we were to take on the obligation of paying that, we probably, and by increasing taxes and so forth, we probably could. But what it means is that we would be saying to our children, no, not taking care of it, we're saying to our children, you take care of our problem
Right.
now. We can't afford the government we want now, and so we're going to be having this unfunded liability, and we're going to be borrowing money to cover it. You pay for that later. I'm running for Congress, and one of the reasons I am running for Congress, is because what we see here in New Hampshire with that problem, we have all over the place in many different areas with the federal government. We always talk about the public debt as $17 trillion, and that is huge. It's over our annual gross domestic product. It's about 105%. That's the area that Greece was in. Right. Now the difference between Greece and us is that we have a reserve currency. We can just keep on printing money to finance that debt for a while. The other problem is that, remember I said we have $4 to $7 billion unfunded liability for the state of New Hampshire. Right. Depending on how you look at and play out Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, student loan programs, all these entitlement programs, we're somewhere between 80 and 120 trillion on unfunded liability. That isn't sustainable. What we have to do is starting to address some of these problems, just as we're starting to do in Concord. And you know, Kevin, we can do it. We can do it. We really can.
Right, but we need the right people in office to do that.
We need people who are not going to pander, just as we didn't pander 2 years ago when we were putting the budget together. We said, this is it, folks. We can't keep increasing taxes in the middle of a recession. We have to live within our means. Come in and talk with us. And we did. We talked to everyone about how we allocated limited resources to meet core functions of government and to help those out who are so challenged that they can't.
So we had a supermajority, and we didn't, you know, even with the supermajority, it was like pulling teeth to get everything that we wanted done.
Yes.
And when you get into Congress, how are you going to, I know we're going to have your leadership in there, but I don't know how we change that, because right now it doesn't seem like they're making any progress. I know we have a Democratic Senate right now, right, but it seems like we're not moving forward, you know. And
you know, people, when we took over the majority a little over 2 years ago now, people said to me, boy, you guys have a real problem here. You have a structural deficit that's approaching 20% of state spending. And one of the things I said to them is that with problems come opportunity. And that's not just glib. That there comes a point where you don't have any alternative but to solve the problem. You know, in that situation, the alternative was to come up either with a very robust tax, a sales tax, or you know, an income tax, or return to New Hampshire fundamentals, which is live within our means.
Right.
And I think we're at that point on the federal side, you know, where, you know, I talk about 105% public debt for gross national product. And you look at the recession that's now going into its 6th year, there comes a point where people are going to say, we've got to do things differently. We have to solve these problems. Everyone acknowledges that whether it's a year or 2 or 3 or 5 or 6 years, at some point our country is going to hit a fiscal wall, and it's not going to be pretty. On the other hand, what we can do is start bringing our finances under control. Can we in one budget, the way we did up in Concord, can we in Washington in one budget take care of the problem? No, but can we put the nation on a glide path to solvency? We sure can. You know, we're at $3.6 trillion in spending in the federal government now. If we just stop the increases, you know, depending on how the economy works out, for 4 or 5 years, revenues will catch up.
And you know the games that they're playing, though, is they'll say, well, you cut back 3% on your spending,
yeah.
And oh my gosh, we got, you know, kids can't visit the White House.
I know, sequester. I mean, yeah, and it's important, I think, for someone like me to be down there and be part of that discussion, or even you, for example. We can come out in New Hampshire and say, wait a minute, a 2 or 3% cut because of a sequester is absolutely doable, because in our state, we cut state-funded spending 18%. And we did it in an intelligent manner that met the needs of the people.
It's still working.
And it's still working. You know, I think most of your viewers will acknowledge that while they may have been touched by some of those cuts, but life went on, and it and we handled the core needs of government. We took care of people decently. Right. And we can do that on the federal level as well. You know, I remember when I was younger, and I remember, my first political awareness of things was sort of in the Kennedy administration. And I can remember coming across articles talking about how we had the first $100 billion budget. And, and even as a young fellow, 10 years old or so, I sat there going, that's shocking. That's really shocking. We have 36 times that in 50 years. We're at $3.6 trillion. That's what people have to realize is that, I don't know what inflation has been since the early 60s. It's probably been 5, 6, 8 times. We are way, way beyond where we have to be in spending money. We can bring it under control.
Now, there's the fiscal problem that we have.
Right.
And, it seems like every day, almost every day I turn on the news, there's something major that slaps me in the face, and whether it's the IRS scandal, whether it's the Fast and Furious, whether it's the drones, whether it's the NSA,
Right.
And it just keeps going on and on and on, and it's almost as though there's something that it's untouchable. You can't seem to stop this steamroller rolling over all our rights and liberties, and nobody's doing anything. And in my opinion, I'm not an attorney, but I don't know why Eric Holder is still our Attorney General.
Right.
I just don't get it. I don't understand if he was held in contempt by Congress, and why is he still there?
Yeah, we don't have the same discussion going on that we had going on 20 or 30 years ago. You're absolutely right. This is a man who nominated a communist for a serious position. He nominated Van Jones, who said in the past, I'm a communist, described himself as a Marxist. Eric Holder has been held in contempt of Congress. If one of the first things that his department did, the Attorney General's office did, was vacate the judgment. Not only, the Black Panthers vacated the judgment. There was a judgment that the Black Panthers had intimidated voters in Philadelphia by standing in front of a poll with uniforms on and belly clubs, I guess, some sort of sticks, and they vacated that. Now, all of those things together, when I was younger, remember watching things happen in the Nixon administration, that would have ended the administration, not just
Right.
the department head, but would have ended it. There is an ability, it seems to me, of the Democrats in particular, the liberals, to distract us from what is important. We look at these scandals going on, and so what do they want to talk about? Well, if it's the election, they want to make up a war on women. If it's after the election, they want us to concentrate on these contrived charges of racism and stand your ground defenses in Florida with the Martin Zimmerman murder case.
Mm-hmm.
And certainly no one wants to see a young man be murdered, but during the trial, 4 children were murdered in Chicago. No one talked about it. Over one weekend in Chicago, 56 people were killed.
Totally politicized
with gun
this
violence.
case. I had a teacher, and I'm sorry for interrupting you, but his name was Merville in high school. He made us read the book, The Naked Communist, and a few things like that. And we'd have to write notes. And I remember one of the notes, it is clear as day, that semantics were the atom bomb of persuasion. And in changing the definitions, you change the outcome. And I learned that in high school. And the Democrats skillfully do that. The Republicans don't seem to have a clue. I'm sorry. They just don't know how to counter. And it's almost like you're trying to argue with logic in an illogical argument or precedent with
Right.
logic,
Right.
and it doesn't, that square doesn't fit in that round hole.
And I think part of the reason is that conservatives, Republicans generally deal in ideas, and we agree on the language, and we want to talk about where those ideas. the left tends to look at the political process as one where they're gaining power, and moreover, they really can't talk about what their core philosophy is, because the core philosophy really does come down to we know better how to run your life than you do, and so we need to take money from you in order to finance our efforts to do that. And most people, if you tell them this is what I want to do when you elect me, are going to say, I don't think I'll vote for you. I think I'll vote for the person who doesn't want to take a lot of my money, doesn't want to control my life. So what they do is turn to another discussion, and the discussion is, oh, look how evil that person is, and look what a bad person is. Either he's either not smart, or he's immoral, or he's criminal. I mean, I guess I'm painfully aware of this, because although I knew as a conservative speaker, I knew I'd be one of the most conservative speakers that New Hampshire's had in many years. And I knew, therefore, there would be a substantial pushback. There'd be a lot of name-calling and everything. It really struck home, though, when I saw how far away from the facts that it departed, and how constant it is, and how it's unremitting to this day.
Just to back up what you said, I've said this on my show many times, that we would be in the House, and you would watch over on the right-hand side all the Democrats sitting with their arms folded, laughing almost at the Republican debating the Republican, and the Democrat just watching us beat each other up, because we were beating up each other on ideas, whether it was the libertarians, the conservatives, or whatever you want to call them, Republicans, rhinos, whatever.
Right.
We would all be beating each other up, and we were really beating these ideas up and pushing them, and they would just be sitting there with their arms folded, and no is the answer, and that's the way it's going to be. And they didn't contribute to the idea, the process.
No.
And I thought that was rather comical, but yet that's why I think a lot of us didn't get as much done, because we were the party of ideas. And I believe it was you or somebody else that said something to the effect, look, we're the Republican Party, and it's hard to herd cats. They're going to be going this way and this way and this way. They don't follow line. I can remember the current speaker walking up and down the aisle going, shh, 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 don't, sit down, sit down. Whoa.
Right.
You obey.
Right.
You don't represent the people. You listen to me, and you are sheep. And that all came across to me like that.
Right. And so, having been in the House now, for the last decade or so, and knowing a lot of Democrats, and seeing a lot of younger Democrats come in and then go, and I've had conversations with them, and one of the things that is striking is just exactly what you said. You get discussions like, well, they don't want me to speak yet, or it's not the second half of the term. And I sit there, and Kevin, I'm quite frankly amazed, because I have to tell you, I spoke on the first session day that I was in. I was actually... That's
why you were elected?
Yeah, it was why I was elected. Now, as it turned out, I had something to say. It was involving a censure of someone, and I talked to folks about what it was, and they asked me to speak. But, I didn't hold back at all, and I wouldn't expect, when I was there, I didn't expect any a Republican to hold back. If you had something, let's talk about that.
Right.
And
it can be intimidating to get up there and looking at all those people. I've done it once or twice, but and I've tried to keep my cool. But it can be intimidating. But that's why they elected us. And you have a passion. You want to get something done.
Right.
I just want to go back a little bit, real quickly, to this whole idea of justice, because I had Representative Itzy and Representative Mirsky on my show at one point, and they were talking about the Constitution and the whole idea of the New Hampshire Constitution. And the whole idea of us having this Constitution was to provide, first of all, justice for the New Hampshire citizens. And when we pledge allegiance, and justice for all, if we don't have justice in our the economy, everybody talks about the economy, but if we don't have justice or property rights or our liberties, if we lose those, who cares how much money we got? How, these things can't get lost.
Right.
And I'm afraid that when people say, well, I'm a social conservative, is that code for like all this other stuff doesn't care? You don't care about this? Or you know, right now that's not a priority. These things trouble me about our party because we need to be cohesive. The Democratic Party is cohesive. They do follow. I mean, they listen, Heil, you know, and,
Right.
and you had one of those
Right.
in the House. But how do we, I don't know, bond our message?
We're never going to have the organizing principle of the Democratic Party, which is control and we want to be in power. I mean, you can see who the Democratic legislators are when you're up there, in particular this term. It's a lot of people who have been sent by unions, people who have been sent by charities that are really just recipients that have been run on government funds, government grants. And so there's an organizing principle there, which we have to stay in power because we need to get money to the unions, we need to increase our pay, we need to increase grants and spending and so forth.
Right.
We don't have that. If you look at, conversely, who tends to be Republicans, it's people who own some businesses or they're come up for a term or two if they've talked their boss into giving them a little bit of flexibility on time and so forth. And they come up for reasons of ideas. Either they're really concerned about libertarian ideas, or they're constitutionalists and really are concerned, as you are, about where our society is going relative to these constitutional principles, or they come up as a social conservative. They're very concerned about the underlying morals of our society and whether it's being lost as we look at certain changes. And that means that there's going to be more turmoil on the Republican side because we're constantly discussing, is it more important, for example, that we protect marriage than it is that we protect, you know, gun rights? Or, you know, there's this constant shifting back and forth. And it's almost unavoidable.
Right.
You know, I see it all the time, Kevin. You know, I watch these votes now. You know, I'm sitting in the backbench, and you know, you'll see a vote, and the Democrats, the caucus, they have a caucus of about 220 members. 1 or 2 members will depart from it at most. It's sort of unusual even when that happens. And I've never seen a Republican vote where there wasn't people all over the place.
Yeah.
That's why I prize that discussion. But it's,
Well, you'd see as you go in to vote the day of session, there'd be the pink sheet, there'd be the white sheet, there'd be the green sheet, there'd be the gold sheet.
Yeah, gold.
The gold sheet, and we had Eileen Landy's here on there not too long ago. So those were the competing ideas. I don't know what the colors were for the Democrat. I never caught on to that. And
yeah, it's persuasive throughout the party. I went to a town meeting, annual meeting in Mount Vernon where I was, and you know, they were going through. There was obviously a presence of a lot of union people there because we had some budget issues that came up, and a bunch of them left. All of a sudden, just left. And they left pieces of paper on their chair, and it basically was saying, Article so-and-so, vote this way. Article so-and-so, vote this way. And then it said, after like a certain article, you can leave now. And I'm sitting there going, I could never talk to a Republican that way.
No.
I could never talk to a
you'd get so much kickback,
Yeah,
they'd oust you.
Yeah, they would. So it's just a different approach to what government means.
Finally, I know that you're running for Congress, and we definitely need leadership like this. I just, you know, you have my endorsement.
Well, thank you,
publicly.
Ken. Thank you.
You are one of within the last 100 years, you're the person who actually got the Redress of Grievance Committee up and running. And God help me if I don't mention that, because that's, you know, one of the committees I sat on.
Right.
One of the things I think that people didn't understand is that this committee wasn't really a Republican committee. It was for everybody. And it seemed to be sabotaged by the Democratic Party. And they didn't realize that their people could also come up and talk about issues and make petitions. And they didn't treat it like that.
No, our Constitution, and I'd have discussions with them, and I'd try to take them aside and say, don't you realize our Constitution says the people get to petition their government? I said, it may be uncomfortable for you and me at times to look at someone and deal with their petition and deal with their concerns, but that's our obligation to do it. We can't just say, don't like to do it, therefore if you send in a petition, we're going to find the first circular file that we can, and it's going to go right in there. That's our obligation. It's a disappointment to me that they haven't continued it in place. I hope the next Republican speaker does, and I hope over time people can begin to see it not as a unusual process, but as a required, constitutional, valuable process.
When civil rights are being attacked, aren't the Democrats worried about that? If somebody's civil rights, a government agency hurts somebody's civil rights, aren't they worried about that? I would think they would be. You know, we have, if one of our members of Republicans or the Democratic Party or the judicial, the executive, any branch of government oversteps its bounds and hurts one of the people, they have a right to petition their government. And it should not look at Democrat, Republican at that point.
And if I can tell you why I think that they react the way they do, and maybe we can just leave it at that, they are the party of government, and people come in and talk about their grievances with government, and they too often say, you're aggrieved with what is most valuable to me, which is government.
Right. It becomes a sacred cow to them.
Yeah.
And I find that shameful. I just think that we need to get back, you know, bring back the John F. Kennedy Democrats. Bring them back.
Right.
Because I don't see that today. I don't see that spirit today. And I bring them back and bring back some real conservative Republicans.
Again, you know, as I told you, the first political awareness I have was during the Kennedy years, and I thought very highly of a man who would stand up and say, that's not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. We don't hear that now on the left, because among liberals, it's just, what kind of victim am I, and who's going to take care of my problem for me?
Right.
And that's not what America was about.
How can people get in touch with your campaign?
So I have a website. It's OBrienForCongress.com. I have an email address. It's OBrienForCongress@gmail.com. Both ways, you can go right on. You can send me an email either through the website or directly, and I look forward to having a discussion with people over the next 14 months or so.
Well, I appreciate you gracing this show. It tends to be a little controversial, but I appreciate you coming on. And,
okay, thanks, Kevin.
And best wishes and good luck to you.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching Speak Up. And if you want to get in touch with Speaker O'Brien, you know how to do that. We appreciate the mortgage specialist for sponsoring this show, as well as the Center for Redress of Grievances. And until next week, stay tuned.
Every day, citizens around the country are faced with new dilemmas. Dilemmas that affect them profoundly. Whether it's injustice, discrimination, falling through the cracks, scandals and cronyism, balances of power, ethics, religious freedoms, state versus citizens, and unfunded mandates, and the list goes on and on and on. Welcome to Speak Up. It's directed at those who have fallen through the cracks, and it gives them a voice. It's your turn to speak up. To stand up and fight back.
The preceding program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.